The streets of Gaza are reduced to rubble, yet the noise does not fade. Explosions echo, sirens scream, the dust never settles. Israel pushes forward with an operation it describes as existential. Hamas responds with rockets that streak across the night sky, and civilians find themselves caught in the relentless cycle of fire and ruin. Each strike is counted not only in casualties but in costs. Billions of dollars already burned in days, billions more to come. Behind the smoke, behind the speeches of generals and ministers, lies a reality that financial analysts and policymakers can no longer ignore. This war is not just fought with missiles, it is fought with money. And the question pressing on the region and the world alike is simple but merciless. How long can both sides afford it? Stay with us, subscribe, because what unfolds here will shape not only the Middle East, but global markets and geopolitics in the months ahead. For Israel, the Gaza war is a strain measured in multiple currencies. The military mobilization alone is enormous. Reservists pulled from their jobs, industries disrupted, logistics chains diverted to sustain the campaign. Every missile launched, every armored unit deployed, every drone circling overhead represents millions of dollars in direct cost. The government insists this is necessary. Survival cannot be priced. Yet markets do not deal in rhetoric. Investors calculate, ratings agencies scrutinize, bond yields fluctuate. Israel's economy, vibrant and innovative, is resilient, but resilience is not infinite. Tourism collapses, foreign investment hesitates, consumer confidence sinks. How long before the war effort begins to bleed into the foundations of growth? For Gaza and Hamas, the picture is different, yet no less brutal. The enclave's economy is already shattered, blockaded, dependent on external aid for even the most basic sustenance. Factories are gone, infrastructure is crumbling, electricity and water supplies are fragile. And yet Hamas continues to fire rockets, continues to fight, continues to demonstrate a resilience that seems impossible in such conditions. How is this sustained? The answer lies in networks of support, clandestine and overt, funding streams from sympathetic states, smuggled supplies, improvised manufacturing. For Hamas, the war is not only about military confrontation, it is about endurance, about surviving long enough to claim victory in the eyes of its supporters. But can endurance built on ruins truly last, or is it only a matter of time before the financial and human cost becomes unbearable? The humanitarian crisis adds another dimension, one that weighs not only on morality, but on money. Tens of thousands displaced, hospitals overwhelmed, aid agencies warning of catastrophe. Every day without resolution multiplies the bill that the international community will eventually have to pay. Reconstruction will require tens of billions of dollars. From where will they come? From Gulf monarchies seeking influence, from Western donors managing domestic backlash, from global institutions already stretched thin by crises elsewhere. The ledger is already filling with debts yet to be paid. Meanwhile, global markets watch uneasily. Oil prices twitch with every escalation. Investors wonder if the conflict will spill beyond Gaza, if Lebanon, Iran, or even the broader Gulf will be drawn in. Insurance premiums for shipping routes rise. Risk assessments are rewritten. Energy futures swing. For traders in London, New York, Shanghai, Gaza may seem far away, but its tremors travel fast. One prolonged conflict here can send ripples across the global economy. This war is not new, yet its scale and persistence feel different. Israel faces unprecedented scrutiny at home and abroad. Hamas wagers its very survival on the ability to endure devastation, and civilians pay the highest price. The cycle of attack and counterattack is not only reshaping the map of Gaza, it is reshaping the financial map of the region. And as the costs rise, the question is not just who wins militarily, but who survives economically. That is why we must watch closely, must look beyond the images of rubble and the headlines of retaliation. Because behind every explosion is an invoice, behind every speech, a budget, behind every promise, a debt. The war in Gaza is measured not only in blood, but in balance sheets. And in the end, those balance sheets may decide the future more decisively than the rockets themselves. Subscribe and follow this story with us, because it is not just a regional tragedy, it is a global reckoning. For Israel, the Gaza war is not only a military campaign, it is a national stress test that measures the resilience of its economy, its politics, and its social fabric. The government insists that there is no alternative. Security comes first, survival cannot be compromised. Yet even as officials project confidence, the arithmetic of war begins to weigh on every sector of Israeli life. The numbers are staggering. mobilizing hundreds of thousands of reservists, pulls workers from offices, factories, and farms. Skilled labor vanishes overnight as men and women trade their civilian jobs for uniforms. The high-tech sector, long the pride of Israel's economy, feels the absence of engineers and programmers who are suddenly in the field. Construction slows, agriculture stumbles, services shrink. A nation at war cannot run at full economic capacity, no matter how advanced its systems. The cost of weapons themselves is equally crushing. Each missile launched from the Iron Dome system costs tens of thousands of dollars, often to intercept rockets that cost Hamas only a fraction of that. Each precision-guided bomb, each hour of flight by fighter jets, each deployment of armored divisions represents millions in direct expenses. These are investments in survival, but survival has a price that accumulates faster than most societies can endure. Israel's budget deficit widens, its borrowing needs increase, and global credit agencies take note. The financial markets remain calm for now, but they are watching. At the same time, the war amplifies existing political pressures. The government, already polarized, faces dissent from citizens who question the long-term strategy. Protests that once focused on judicial reforms now shift to the war effort, to questions about leadership, about accountability, about the vision for the future. Can a government divided by ideology and rocked by public discontent maintain unity under the weight of war? Or will political fragility seep into military planning, weakening the very campaign it seeks to sustain? Tourism, once a reliable pillar of the Israeli economy, collapses. Flights are canceled, visitors vanish, hotels and restaurants stand empty. Investment slows as foreign companies hesitate to expand in an environment shadowed by rocket sirens. Startups, the crown jewels of Israel's global image, struggle to attract capital in a time when the horizon is clouded by uncertainty. Each of these shocks is survivable on its own. Together, they erode confidence and weaken the foundations of growth. And yet Israel is not defenseless economically. Its economy is diverse, its financial sector sophisticated, its ties to global markets strong. Years of growth and innovation have built buffers that can absorb short-term shocks. The state has weathered wars before and recovered quickly. But can it do so when the costs are measured not in weeks, but in months, not in millions, but in tens of billions? Every day of fighting lengthens the road to recovery. Every escalation deepens the hole from which the country must climb. There is also the psychological cost, harder to quantify, but no less real. Businesses hesitate to plan, families hesitate to spend, communities hesitate to invest in a future that feels uncertain. The rhythm of normal life is broken, and with it the confidence that sustains an economy beyond numbers and charts. The paradox of Israel's position is stark. It has the resources, the technology, the determination to wage this war for as long as necessary. But the longer it continues, the more those same resources are strained, the more the strengths turn into vulnerabilities. A strong economy can fund a war. A prolonged war can weaken the economy. Where does the line lie? When does resilience begin to crack under the weight of necessity? For now, Israel pushes forward, confident in its military superiority and determined to achieve objectives it deems vital. But as rockets fall and bombs strike, as budgets stretch and protests simmer, the question becomes sharper. What will victory cost, and who will pay the bill? If Israel's struggle is defined by the burden of sustaining an advanced economy under fire, Gaza's reality is defined by surviving amid ruins. For the enclave, war is not an interruption of normal life. It is the continuation of hardship that has lasted for years, intensified into catastrophe. Hamas frames this as endurance, as proof that even under siege, resistance survives. But endurance has a cost, and that cost is borne by more than fighters. It is borne by 2 million people, trapped in a strip of land where infrastructure is collapsing and the future is always uncertain. The economy of Gaza is a shadow of an economy. Blockade, bombardments, and destruction have stripped it of industry, of exports, of regular commerce. Jobs vanish, businesses fail, supply chains break. Electricity runs for only a few hours a day. Water is scarce. Medical services are stretched beyond breaking point. In such a landscape, how does Hamas continue to fire rockets, to build tunnels, to operate command structures? The answer lies in networks that reach far beyond Gaza itself. Funding flows in from sympathetic governments and private donors. Iran provides financial and technical assistance, regional supporters contribute cash and materials, and global sympathizers send smaller but steady streams of resources. Smuggling routes, though heavily policed, still operate, bringing in parts that can be repurposed for weapons. Local workshops turn raw materials into improvised drones, rockets, explosives. Hamas does not need sophisticated arsenals to sustain its campaign. It needs only to show that it can keep fighting. In asymmetric warfare, symbolism often outweighs effectiveness, but the people of Gaza pay the price. Every rocket built is a resource not spent on rebuilding homes. Every tunnel dug is labor diverted from civil life. Every strike from Israel brings destruction that takes years to repair, if it can be repaired at all. The humanitarian catastrophe is inseparable from the economic one. Hospitals overwhelmed with wounded cannot function as centers of recovery. Schools destroyed by bombs cannot prepare a new generation for stability. Aid agencies speak of catastrophe, but catastrophe has become the status quo. Hamas relies on this paradox. Each image of destruction, each report of civilian suffering, becomes a weapon in the battle for global opinion. The worse conditions become, the more Hamas can claim to embody resilience. International sympathy translates into aid. Aid is manipulated to sustain survival. Yet, the cycle is unsustainable. Can a population living under constant deprivation truly endure indefinitely? How many more years, how many more wars, before exhaustion outweighs defiance? There is also the internal cost to Hamas itself. Maintaining authority over Gaza requires more than rockets. It requires governance, however fragile. Collecting taxes on goods smuggled through tunnels, administering minimal services, policing dissent. These structures exist, but they exist in the ruins of a state that cannot function. Every escalation risks pushing the population to the edge of collapse, and collapse could mean not only humanitarian disaster, but political vacuum. If Hamas survives militarily, but loses control socially, what then? International players calculate their positions carefully. Iran and other backers provide support, but measured, calibrated, enough to sustain Hamas without provoking direct confrontation. Gulf states and Turkey posture with rhetoric, but hesitate to commit resources that might drag them deeper into the conflict. Western powers channel aid to civilians, but cannot ensure it reaches them unfiltered. In this web of contradictions, Hamas sustains itself, not thriving, not winning in conventional terms, but refusing to disappear. For Gaza, the future is counted not in growth, but in survival. Each day without total collapse is presented as a kind of victory. But survival built on perpetual crisis is fragile by definition. How long before the costs, economic, human, political, overwhelm even the strongest networks of support? And when that happens, who will step in to rebuild, and on what terms? The paradox remains: Hamas survives because Gaza suffers, and Gaza suffers because Hamas survives. It is a loop with no clear exit, except through escalation or transformation. But for now, the bombs fall, the rockets fly, the networks operate, and the people endure. For how long is the question that no leader on either side seems able to answer? The war in Gaza does not stop at Gaza's borders. Its shockwaves ripple outward, touching every capital in the Middle East, unsettling financial markets, reshaping diplomatic calculations, and stirring anxieties from Washington to Beijing. What began as a localized confrontation has become a stress test for the entire region, and by extension, for the global order that depends on Middle Eastern stability. The question no analyst can escape is this: will Gaza remain a tragedy contained, or is it the spark that ignites a wider fire? Energy markets feel the tremors first. Oil prices jump with every escalation, even when supply lines are untouched. Investors remember too well the lessons of history. Wars in the Middle East rarely stay local for long. A missile exchange between Israel and Hamas does not threaten tankers in the Gulf, but the fear that Iran or Hezbollah might enter the conflict raises premiums for shipping insurance, tightens futures markets, and rattles fragile economies already under strain from inflation. Each uptick in crude prices filters quickly into global inflation data, forcing central banks to recalculate strategies. In New York and Frankfurt, in Tokyo and London, decisions about interest rates suddenly hinge on explosions in Gaza City. Diplomatic tensions rise alongside market anxieties. The United States doubles down on its alliance with Israel, pledging weapons, money, and political cover. But Washington faces a balancing act. Support for Israel alienates much of the Arab world, where public anger grows louder with every image of devastation. Saudi Arabia, once on the cusp of normalization with Israel, hesitates, recalculates, repositions itself as a cautious mediator. Egypt struggles to manage its border with Gaza, caught between humanitarian obligations and domestic fears. Qatar positions itself as a broker, while Iran hints at escalation but stops short of open war. Each actor maneuvers, calculating costs, benefits, risks. For Europe, The war adds another layer of instability to a continent already strained by energy insecurity and the war in Ukraine. European leaders voice concern, call for restraint, and send aid. But beneath the speeches lies fear. Another surge of refugees, another spike in energy prices, another test of fragile unity. Can Europe absorb yet another crisis while still grappling with its own economic contradictions? China and Russia watch closely. Beijing positions itself as a potential peace broker, offering rhetoric about dialogue and stability, while its real focus remains securing energy flows from the region. Moscow seizes the opportunity to criticize U.S. policy, to present itself as a defender of the global South, to exploit divisions in Western alliances. Both powers see Gaza not only as a humanitarian disaster, but as a geopolitical opportunity. Meanwhile, the financial costs multiply. Israel spends billions each month sustaining its operations. Gaza sinks deeper into destruction that will one day demand reconstruction on a colossal scale. Donor fatigue looms. Western taxpayers question endless aid. Arab states calculate the price of rebuilding a territory that may soon be destroyed again. International institutions tally debts that stretch beyond their capacity. The war is fought with rockets, but its shadow will be measured in loans, grants, and deficits. And then there is the human factor, the weight that cannot be quantified on balance sheets, but that defines the future nonetheless. Generations in Gaza grow up with ruins as their normality, each war erasing years of fragile progress. In Israel, citizens live under the shadow of sirens, investing their trust in a government that promises security but struggles to deliver lasting peace. Trauma spreads across societies, and trauma, in time, becomes politics. Harder stances, deeper divisions, fewer chances for compromise. What future can grow from such soil? Scenarios for the coming months diverge, but none are comfortable. A short war that ends with another uneasy ceasefire would freeze the conflict in place, leaving Gaza devastated and Israel uneasy, waiting for the next round. A wider war drawing in Hezbollah or Iran would escalate costs exponentially, shaking global markets and redrawing regional alliances. A long war of attrition would bleed both sides, strain their backers, and entrench despair. In every path, the price is high, and the bill will not be confined to the region. This is why the Gaza war matters far beyond its borders. Because in an interconnected world, a conflict in one corner reshapes the financial and political realities of many others. Because each bomb dropped is not only a tragedy in Gaza, but a signal to markets, to diplomats, to societies that the fragile balance of the Middle East can shift in an instant. The war in Gaza is not only about Israel and Hamas. It is about the resilience of global systems, the credibility of alliances, the stability of markets, the patience of societies. It is about whether the world can afford another prolonged conflict when it is already burdened by so many. And this is why we will keep watching, keep analyzing, keep asking the questions others prefer to avoid. Because understanding this war is not just a matter of regional interest, it is a matter of global necessity. Subscribe and stay with us because what happens in Gaza today will shape economies, policies, and futures far beyond the rubble of tomorrow.